Who's your colleague?
And I'm just like, holding out to but I don't think it's going to. What's even sadder, you know?
Next session, Rebecca starts.
Right, exactly. Like, it still would have been better when I first moved here 6 years ago, but I wasn't thinking about that. I was, you know, no one, like, very few people think about buying a house. I love it.
Yeah, I was like,
It's just, I think people were born in the wrong time. Everyone in my family, like, like most of my generation, my family, most of us don't have, like,
There's companies that do it, like if you say.
a couple of my cousins, they're also big on their houses and they're buying houses in Texas. So it's like very different. Yeah, they got very young, and bought a house in Texas.
it's all the way around.
So we're going to the same place?
Yes, so we're gonna
When's the next,
even though the laws.
April 15th. Yeah, it's at, Casey.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's just completely.
So, that's funny.
Yes.
I watched your boys eat. I watched your boys eat. I'm trying to stay.
You may have like on the slides, because I believe.
You know when there's like teaching career, there's like was like this. So I'm here now, apparently. Where I thought I was like down here, but really it's here because next year's gonna go like this. I'm just getting like more and more bad news. I was just telling him like someone else too. Oh yeah, I was with him and I was telling Ben about like how this one kind of one got burned out of the charter. I mean, Mom didn't say it word for word, but she said everything except for that. So I was like, okay, so he became promise and he came from a charter school. Okay, 2 and 2, exactly. And then I had another one who the mom was like, oh, he's in school now. And I'm like, great, can't wait to do this. So that's next week, that's gonna be next week. Where the mom herself was like, oh, you're gonna have your hands full. He's quite a bit. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm so excited. And then we also lost $300,000 for next year. So we're cutting down on teachers, so I'm gonna get a lot more kids next year. And we're gonna have a lot more support because we lost some with a very, very similar. So that's what, no. But honestly, I felt this way when I was in Baltimore. I felt like there's something.
Makes a big difference.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome. I'm Artisha Martin. I am a teacher at Kramer.
Yeah, and I'm Ben Williams. I teach 12th grade social studies and DC history, AP government, US government at Capital City Public Church School, and also represent the Board of Warren on DC State Board of Education.
Alright, so this is the agenda for today. We're talking about the revision of the social studies standards. So we're gonna go over the standards timeline, is how do we get there? Some of the public concerns and the feedback, and we're gonna also ask like what resources we educators will need in order to effectively implement the standards, and then have some time for open discussion. But before we do that, we do our history and social studies. We gotta have a really good warm up. So think about an historical event that stayed with you. We're gonna ask that you share your name. And what was the subject matter of the event? Why did this event resonate?
Okay.
So I'm gonna give you guys a minute to think. History's long, the story, so it's gonna take us some time. And then I'm gonna volunteer people, and no one volunteers themselves. Okay. We're just coming in, we're just thinking about how we're gonna answer those questions.
Yeah, I can start us off. So, for people who just walked in, again, my name is Ben Williams, I'm a DC history and discovery teacher. And so that's my connection to education, also representing one of DC State Board of Education. Subject matter for me is, it's really powerful for me to learn about the Vietnam War, and the protests that also for the Vietnam War. It resonates with me because I was able to travel to Vietnam and see that, but I also see it as a way in which the American public was able to be deeply involved in pressuring our government on these issues. So I think it's a powerful history.
Is there anyone else who volunteer to share? Yes. What's your name?
Vanessa,
Okay, thank
yeah, last name is Williams. I, your pronouns, I am the program manager for DC Area Educators for Social Justice, so that's something that keeping for change. Subject matter, I'm from Florida, and I just work with companies. That doesn't get, we don't get a lot of hand claps these days, so thank you.
I will claim Florida today.
See, yes, so stick with that idea, stick with that, because my thing is, I grew up in Jacksonville, so to me, like, I went to Ann Johnson Middle School, with the Stanton College prep was, well, I mean, it's a magnet school now, so that is, really sorted history, and at the point when I came through it, it was on the takeover and all that, but before that, right, it was a, Black school. It's where, James Johnson, like, he was principal of it, right, so, like, the Jacksonville that I know was, like, very Black, very, like, besides, like, the writing of the Black National Anthem, right, so, like, a lot of, like, the history that's, like, often associated with Jacksonville was named after Andrew Jackson, like, all this unsavory history, like, that's associated with it, like, it's often, like, what a lot of people think of, but, like, the Jacksonville that I know is very Black, very, like, progressive, very, but that's the part, like, I would like to celebrate. So it resonated with me because, like, in my head, like, Jacksonville, I mean, I think we need to have a lot more applause these days for a lot of that, but that's what I think about a lot. Specifically, like, my upbringing there, how personal it was to me. I thought it was just really cool to lift up that part as well, right? It's mixed bag, history is so many sides. There's so many angles you can come into it from it. That's story.
Anyone else who's volunteering to share?
So I'm Raymond Hamilton. I'm the social studies manager for DC Public Schools. I'm also from Florida. And my event that's resonating with me is a very similar story, given what we know about Florida right now. So my research is all in the Black freedom struggle. So one of the things that really stuck with me is the number of Black Power groups that were advocating for their own communities in the late sixties, early seventies in the state of Florida. There were at least 22 different groups that were very community-based. And they were doing the same work that, more recognized groups like Black Panthers were doing nationally. They were doing on the local level. So that's one of the things we're starting to do.
Thank you, Raven. Yes.
So I'm Ruth Wattenberg, and I used to be on the State Board of Ed, but I am no longer. These guys. So what I'm thinking about is some number of years ago, I can't remember when, I read the Isabel Wilkinson book about the Great Migration, and what stuck with me about it is like, oh, that's what happened between the Civil War and Reconstruction and the 60s and the Civil Rights Movement, because it's like, you're never taught it, and even as somebody who sort of follows what's going on, more than most people, was sort of, it never got connected, so.
Thank you for sharing. Yes.
She came to my class to talk about that book about 10 years ago. I'm Fraser O'Leary. I'm on the State Board of Education. I'm a teacher. I taught at DCS for 47 years. Mine's a little different than everyone else in the room.
Because you are history.
Because I am history.
Wow, shots fired.
Yeah, okay.
I was a sophomore in college, walking across campus on November 22nd, 1963. And somebody said Kennedy had been shot. And my father's best man, when my mother's father was John Kennedy. They were in the Navy together, about to go to the Pacific in Chicago. And he had stayed in touch with Kennedy, but not a lot. But we didn't believe it, so we went to the Little Bud's restaurant. I was at Old Dominion College, not university. It was just a little college at the time. And on the television, Walter Cronkite came on and talked about, that John F. Kennedy or whatever had just passed away. And so the whole nation went into mourning. And I never thought about it, but 2 months later, because I flunked out of college the next month, which had nothing to do with Kennedy's death. 2 months later, I joined the Army. This was before Vietnam. I left and went to Vietnam 6 months later. Still before the war, right as the war started, same day the Gulf of Tonkin. So we can talk about that. But that really was something that no political event in my life when I was 19, I guess, at the time, had ever really meant anything to me. That changed the whole country.
Hello, my name is Stella. I work with
program working with Black youth from 6 to 12 grade, so that's my connection to education. And the event I'm thinking of is Italy's attempt to colonize Ethiopia, which is where I'm from. So I know that as the war was starting, there were a couple of Italian fighters that dropped missiles near my grandfather's house, on his house actually, and he lost his leg. And then he decided to fight against colonization. And Ethiopia is one of the few countries in Africa that has not been colonized. And I think there are so many important revolutions that happened before, like the Haitian Revolution, where they had Napoleon quaking in his boots, that it's just a long legacy of anti-colonialism, but also a fight for freedom that I think is still deeply part of the work that I do. So yeah.
Thank you. Stella?
Yeah.
Thank Thank you, Michelle. Is there anyone else who wants to share? I said I was gonna volunteer people, but I feel like enough people volunteer.
We heard you say that, and we were
Yes.
like, let's.
Thank you guys
You're
for
exactly
those that
right.
were sharing. Thank you guys for sharing. So this is our objective, just to engage stakeholders, you guys, in the evaluation of the standards, and just to generate ideas around like how can we effectively implement the standards, and also identify possible resources that will support with the implementation of standards. I feel like we're in a room with such like knowledgeable people that you guys have so much information to share. And I'm excited. All right, so this is why there was a need for the social studies standards. I am not going to read this to everyone, but I think the biggest thing that I took away from this is that the standards were last revised in 2006, before there was even the OSCE, and before there was a state board of education. So obviously there's something had to happen, you know, that we need to do something. And also that there has been like advancements in education and technology that the old standards, the 2006 standards did not reflect, and we just needed to do something in order to bring the standards to current. And the revised draft of the social standards were published on December 16th, and that is because it is consistent with the commitment made by OSCE, the State Board of Education. Are there any questions thus far about what's presented here? So what has changed? What transformation has occurred between 2006 and the 2023 standards is that there's an increased rigor of the standards. A lot of the standards before talked about like, identify. Now the rigor has increased to talk about analyzing, making emphasis. We're also, there's a lot of content now. The standards are hopefully in a place where teachers can successfully teach the content within one school year. Increased student voice and student inquiry. I feel like we're in the nation's capital. Of course, our standards should have a strong voice, a strong focus on student voice and student inquiry, just taking action. We want to increase representations of groups that are usually underrepresented, indigenous, the LGBTQ plus community, as well as our Black students and Latinx. Is that up there? Oh, see, we not represented as well. All right. And also the draft is about the changes around what elementary students are capable of and the examination of white supremacy, racism, and resistance to oppression that have occurred in school. Do you guys have any questions about this?
And I would just add too that like the starting conversations with elementary school students on these topics like reflects changes in scholarship and learning outreach, but should start at an earlier age.
As a member of the, I wasn't on the board as long as Ruth, but I've been on the board for 3 years. It's amazing. I mean, it took 17 years to get to a draft. That was before anyone even knew who Barack Obama was. And we're still working on revisions of this. But OSCE and the state board are working on the revisions together. And we need a lot of public comment because we're not going to approve it. We're not going to approve it if we don't get what we want. And I think it will reflect 2023's idea of what history is. The good thing that we have in the District of Columbia, that monstrous sort of grew in the last couple of weeks as far as controls is that what our standards look like will not make it in Florida.
And that's a good thing.
And not just Florida.
That is a good thing.
Not just in Florida, but, you know, as you all know, there are states that want to teach history where everyone looks like me.
Does Congress have to approve these standards?
Huh?
Does Congress have to approve the standards?
But it doesn't mean they can't.
Yeah, right, stick their hand in it.
To come back to the local conversation here, just in terms of where we are now, we're in the midst of the process. So OSSI is currently revising the draft standards based on public comment. And they have shared a draft with us at the state board. We're gonna go through some of that comment here in just a little bit. There is an event on March 28th, which we also have a link and a QR code to pitch at the end for upcoming community engagement around what schools need for successful implementation, also any additional concerns around the content of the standards. So in April, the state board is going to host public engagement sessions to raise awareness about social studies revisions and to give updates. And that's part of the conversation that we want to have with our time at the end here is how can we best, equitably engage DC's community and make sure that, the sessions are useful and people accessible and meaningful for this process. OSSI is then going to make further revisions to the standards as needed based off of the feedback session and bring a final version of the standards to the state board for the vote. The authority that we have on the State Board of Education is to simply approve them. And so there will be a vote on that sometime in the future. And so the end goal here is that the new approved standards should be implemented in all DCPS and public charter schools by the school year 2024-2025. So there is time here to be able to get this right. And there are market rate shifts, and there are also serious community concerns. And so we want to make sure that we continue to be responsive to those concerns because we haven't updated these standards in almost 20 years. Any questions about this timeline?
There is a goal for when the state board will vote.
Not particularly just yet. I think I'll just speak for myself as the Ward 1 representative that we want to make sure to get it right. And so we still think there's time to be able to work towards implementation in the next school year. That could be the summer, that could be the fall. But I'm most concerned as a representative around the quality of the product and just our continued ability to work with OSSI, and OSSI's been very responsive to the concerns of the public comment. So we'd like to continue that process.
It really is a work in progress. And there have been a lot of changes made on it. So we're hopeful that, because it won't be, you said 23, 24?
24,
25. So we still, that's changed too. That we had to push that, the time has been pushed back to that, where it didn't make sense for us textbooks. But we still don't know about what textbooks we need in 2023.
So, a couple different things. I want to give kind of an overview of what's kind of already gone into the process so far, and then jump into the content a little bit, because that's, I think, where we connect with the history, just like we all have, different personal experiences with what's in our unique to learn. So the comment period was extensive, and I'm not going to read all this because it's a lot of text. I just want to say that like 239 individuals completed the survey that was conducted by OSSI. The largest group was educators and administrators at 34%. There were a variety of other, important institutions that weighed into this work. So that's the third bullet point there with Georgetown, Howard, and then other notable institutions. 66% of the people who weighed in were district residents, but many of the teachers who weighed in were DC teachers who just don't live in the district per se. All 8 wards are represented in the public comment feedback. And most of the respondents were from Ward 6 and Ward 3. Ward 8 did have the fewest number of representatives to the public comment survey. So as we continue this process, we make sure that we're aware of how to make sure all wards are heard in this process. So there were a lot of other civic organizations, and that's one of the strengths of the DC community is that we have so many incredible local and national social studies organizations here. And so we want to also think and open this up, for us as to like, how do we engage those organizations so that when we're revising this, right, we're making sure that the experts are doing the work, and we're looking at states and institutions that already have this right, so that we can make sure that our standards are the best they can be. And then OSSE also already engaged the public with a couple listening sessions, and these are some of the schools that were represented at those sessions. Any questions before we move on there?
And you mentioned the thing on the 28th.
Yeah, we're gonna, that's at the end where we are,
Okay.
for open discussion, and we'll have a link for you to sign up. So this is what I wanted to kind of jump into the content of it. So in terms of OSSE's response to public comment, there are 10, like essentially, there are 10 areas that have been kind of the biggest areas of concern, based off of what people who weighed in have said, and also based off of this, what the state board has looked at and reviewed. So I want to move forward to that because I think that's where we can best spend our time. So these are the 10 biggest areas of concern from the public and from the State Board of Education. I'm going to go through specific concerns because I think they're most meaningful to understand what the concerns are. OSSE, the standards themselves are about 182 pages, and the presentation that OSSE gave the State Board of Education was also over 50 slides. So I did my best to try and like efficiently condense this into a couple slides for us to have a meaningful conversation today. So I'm going to go through them one at a time just to kind of help us understand where we're at in the conversation. So in terms of the first area of concern for the public and the State Board of Education, the first topic was student civic engagement. The specific concerns were around weaving student civic engagement throughout the standards and incorporating a global focus, right? So like there was talk about, oh, students are engaged in, agency and understand their agency locally and nationally, but what about broader humanitarian concerns around the world? And so making sure that, we're kind of, thinking globally on that lens too. In terms of the higher order thinking and refining the precision of standards language, there was concern around, can teachers understand what standards are asking? Right? If we are we using the right verbs when we say evaluate, when we analyze, and our teachers are going to be able to know what the standard is asking. So there are some concerns as the OSSE has shifted to make these standards more thematic, that we're losing some of the specific standards that make it accessible. And I have an example on the next slide, but that's kind of reflected here in terms of specific date ranges, region, and content. So I'll flip ahead and then come back really quickly. But for example, one standard reads, analyzing contemporary issues facing people of Africa and identifying characteristics and causes of these issues, right? So we're talking about an entire continent that is super complex and has languages spoken in the world and, is so diverse in so many ways. So trying to get standards, and there's an example of a revision here where analyze at least one contemporary issue facing one region or country within Africa and identifying characteristics and causes. So kind of making sure that the standards here and the precision of standards language is talking about particular topics. The next one was environmental literacy. The concern around environmental literacy was that there were no standards around the human-environment interaction in particular. So making sure that students are understanding how they're influencing the environment and how the environment is shaping their lives as well. That was one of the standards for the revision process. The next one was digital literacy. I'm really excited about a lot of the stuff around digital literacy because social media is so important in our world today, and we need to be able to tell fact from opinion, and misinformation is rampant, and digital literacy is going to be the main way that students experience the world. So this is a huge shift that is I'm really excited about. But some of the things here were safety, like helping students engage online in making sure they're doing it safely and not seeing content that they shouldn't be exposed to in kindergarten, first, second grade. But also increasing the rigor in older grades. So can students in older grades kind of understand like issues of copyright or fair use of online materials, and some of those issues. To move to the fifth area around white supremacy and hard history in the United States, the idea here was broadening the scope around the harm of white supremacy to other groups in the United States and abroad, right? So realizing that white supremacy isn't just an American issue, and then it doesn't just impact African Americans, it impacts all of us. And so looking at kind of how patterns of colonialism and white supremacy are impacting our entire society, but with particular lenses on how they're impacting different groups. So moving on, because we want to give you a chance to grapple with this and ranking them. So if you could, as we move forward, just keep in mind which are most important to you and the biggest areas of concern. We have democratic principles. So there's concern, right, especially after the January 6th insurrection, that our democracy is very fragile, and we need to make sure that kids can understand comparatively that living in a democracy versus living in an authoritarian government offers very different realities for people. And so really seeing that that stands alone, and that students can really understand the evolution of democracy. In that it has, we've advanced freedom at different points, we've rescinded freedom for certain groups at other times, and that it is not a linear story. So OSSE has done some great work with regards to US history and with regards to world history, trying to update this, so we're excited that they can make these changes. But we'd like the concern from public comment and from the letter that the state board sent OSSE was that we'd like to see more comparative forms of government, and the topic I just laid around why democracy is so unique. And frankly, not the rule, but rather the exception around the world. So I feel like I'm talking a lot, but so I'm going to kind of more quickly go through these. Number 7 is the vertical alignment of content and skill. There's a lack of clarity with some things as to how they connect between grade levels. And so there's an idea of, could we use the Massachusetts social science framework instead of recreating the wheel in DC, looking at some states that really have this right with aligned content, and being able to mirror those things which have produced high outcomes for students around the country. Right? Number 8 is scaling back the thematic approach to standards. In the most recent revision that the state board has engaged OSSE with, OSSE has is working with the University of Pittsburgh to make sure that our standards are less Eurocentric. There's still a concern around Eurocentrism in our world history approach. This is a challenge across the country, right, to making sure that students are understanding history not from an American-centric or Eurocentric perspective. And so we're kind of working with experts who know how to do that to try and make that revision here. I kind of blended 2 and 1. So the number 8 there, where I said that some of the world history standards were also big, was represented by the example on the right. And then last but not least is furthering the inclusion of underrepresented groups. So we've heard from the public comment that there's big shifts, positive shifts in terms of representing Black history, African American history, and understanding aspects of the Black freedom struggle in specificity that weren't included in previous standards. But we've heard from different public testimony and from the public comment that we need to increase inclusion of religious minorities, Asian American, Pacific Islander in particular, Latino, Latinx history, and LGBTQ representation for the DC history standards and the national standards as well. So, given that that was a lot, we want to give you a chance to kind of process that. And so we have a QR code, so if you wouldn't mind taking out your phone. Hopefully this takes you to a nearby.
Yeah, it should take you to a nearby. You can enter your name. It's gonna ask for an option of asking. You don't have to do that.
I just want to say this is so cool.
Thank you. If you're having issues, please let me know.
What do you do after you take the picture?
You don't take it. That's my question.
That's your, oh, you're gonna hit the, oh, yeah, there it goes.
That's like.
So that,
That's
I just click on the
Yeah, the
yellow.
Wi-Fi password, if you need it, is welcome 12, and it's all, I think all.
It just takes that page, it takes you to the So I'm just gonna be on teacher at heart, so I'm just gonna circulate this list. If there are any problems. So it's a drag and drop, like, what's your primary concern on the time, and what are you gonna go, you can do top and bottom on the drag and drop.
Specific, and then people think they only have to teach one region or one country, as opposed to where the original standard here is that there would be curricular suggestions in the vein of reducing the number of students.
That's intentional. Right, so like having, getting enough specific guidance, right, so that maybe if you can't teach every, if you're at least doing enough specificity, that people can learn about culture.
Yeah, I'm, that's why I was asking about that, so, but that was the idea around it, in order to keep the number of things we were trying to do around 30, but we didn't want to like, okay, teach this region now. We want to be like, okay, teach about Africa and then have almost an addendum. These are specific regions
Right.
that you can teach. I just wondered what the conversation was between the state board and us.
Yeah, I think it's tricky because I think there's a part of
Yeah,
that.
you just
like,
scroll
it's
down and
it's
then it's
going
going
off for
it goes.
It's really small.
Yeah.
Turn small.
It gets small when you put it on the line.
It's placed in the right place, but how do we get that to
Yeah, so
Yes.
I got it, but not.
that?
Somewhere
Yeah,
put it
that's like I get that part, but
Yeah, you
like,
want to-
that was our
Everything
show.
is like-
Because I did that same thing in a few regions, especially like Oceania. And it was just like, we don't want people to read that, because like a revised read is a region. And we don't want people to just teach one. You get to the Americas, and you teach, teach US, you teach Canada, you teach the Caribbean,
Right.
stuff like that. You teach that in Central America. So that's what I'm wondering about those conversations. I'm not privy to those conversations.
I don't think anything dropped in.
Yeah, I don't think I have any like extra.
Really have to put it in.
Insight there. I feel like.
Yeah, there it is.
How
And so you could put, it's in order when you bring it over. You can, you have to, looks like.
Yes.
It needs to come in. You want it?
Because, you
Like
know,
the
this is
example
what
you
happened in
stated,
the last
that
month.
would need to be more
Because
clearly,
my computer is.
that you can go more in depth and rather than the breadth.
Can I just take a picture?
All right, so
Like the revision.
one,
Does everyone have the QR code?
so it's over there, just really small.
Okay, it's definitely not the trash bin.
No, if you want to trash it, you put it in.
Okay.
I'd like to at least one.
Yep,
I think that's my concern as
it went.
an educator.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
TWC.
Did it work for you?
I'm not sure.
Okay, this
I
is-
didn't know.
I didn't close that. Okay, so you just pick one, and then you move it over. And that's like you're saying, that is the one that's your most important. Just pick one. But however, the order, number one is to the left, and the one that you care the least about is gonna be all the way to the right.
Okay, so the first one, I push over is one, and then I just keep adding.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Yeah, all the time. So, okay.
Did it work for you? Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, negative. And I'll really pull it up. Yeah. we really like that.
That was the tricky part.
Yeah, that was the part that was supposed to be happy with that.
I have a laptop. So did you log in the earbuds?
Yeah, I got it.
Well, that you. Alright, so we're just gonna look at the results as a way of kind of getting some information of how people feel about topics. It's hard because, this is such an undertaking, that there's so much content and a lot of these topics are really important. Is that how do we really prioritize them? And so glad that, we have so many people engaged in that work. to get good feedback. Also just wanna make sure we're mindful on time. So, we'll be kind of seeing these results here for a moment, seeing, what the people in the room feel, are priority issues. And then we'll be moving into just kind of open discussion on these topics. We're gonna have a couple of guiding questions based on our presentation. And while we're getting this, does anyone care to just share?
So is that Becca? Can I say, so Becca's number one concern was student civic engagement, is that correct?
Oh, I thought 11 was the strongest, so I did it that way.
No, it's really
Don't
important
show
as teachers
mine.
to give very clear.
Yes, and you know what happened, the instructions were on there, but because you're on the phone, it probably didn't come up too naturally, so you see that it said, so did everyone do 11 as their most concern? No, some of us did one.
And I just thought all you did was pick your top two.
Me too. I'm curious as to what
Yes.
like your scale is gonna look like. We'll see.
Okay, yeah, it's okay. So, is Elizabeth, your number one concern about supremacy? Yes.
Honestly, I was just trying to
You over there?
whatever, but I will say all of these areas of concern are areas of concern for me because I work at CISO overseeing the revision, so
Okay,
I truly was just trying to participate in the exercise rather than put my own on the scale.
okay, so we'll just look at one more for the sake of time.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Sorry. So a couple announcements as we wrap up. So after we exit this session, about 20-25 minutes left in the event, there's a photographer who's generously offered to take a big group picture. So if anybody wants to come out onto the patio, we're going to do that. And then there's some like signs, we're doing like social media stuff. And then look at the QR codes posted around. There's opportunities to sign up for the fellowship program that we have, signing up for budget hearings, and a whole bunch of other opportunities. So just explore that stuff, talk to the people with the posters, and then we'll have another like 20-30 minutes after the session ends. Thanks, sir.
We're gonna come back to you and just, does anyone feel like sharing what their top area 1 and 2 top areas were, as we move forward in revising stuff? And you don't have to, we can move into discussions.
I can. And I mainly just picked issues that I knew youth I work with are concerned about. And so a lot of our youth have been, they had a campaign called Queer Affirming Learning Spaces. So I chose 10 for increasing like especially LGBTQ history. And then also, I saw it on the app, but financial literacy. They're very, like, they are very concerned about entering the real world without gaining those skills in this space that is supposed to prepare you for life. So that, and I think also number 5 for like what I feel like are obvious spaces.
I have a concern about number 5 and just the title and the idea of it being like a hard history. Are those the words that are used in the statement, like the hard history?
I I think, to my understanding, I'd have to look at that. I don't think so, but I think hard history, in my view, comes from a podcast by Dr. Hakeem Jeffries. So he's a podcast, and he's a professor but just kind of how we talk about topics that we need to as a nation that are typically excluded.
That's a great question, because it automatically alienates it as less than history.
Right.
Also, who is it hard for and why?
It's not, it's history, it is.
The other thing about number 10 is when you had that list of all the minority groups, those groups didn't even exist as being labeled in 2006. And I think of LGBTQ. There wasn't anything such labeled like that in 2006.
It just wasn't well-known or didn't have a name for.
Right, no, I mean, it's identified, I'm just saying that the unhistory was taught in 2000.
Or the erasure of those groups.
Right.
There's always.
So one of the things that I think is most important is this idea of teaching about the evolution of democracy. It's the principles, but it's also getting people to understand, as Ben said, we shouldn't be taking this for granted.
Thank you.
We need to understand how the alternatives are, how it is that we started one way and now we're this. It was a lot of fights, and then what made them work. So I don't want to talk about that, because Ben did a great job. The other, I do want to say something about the specificity issue, the thematic issue. And then I also want to say something about what I'm calling narrative political history. And it relates to what I just said, which is, so part of what the standards do, I'm very aware that the person running this for us is right here, so I'm partly talking. But part of what the standards do, and I'm thinking, I started by talking about Warmth of Other Suns, which is basically social history and how important it is and how interesting it is and how it grabs you and how much you learn. But what is not really in that book is political narrative. And that's the other thing that can really capture you and drive you and help you understand what's going on. And it's very absent in the Aussie standards, to the extent that in American history too, which starts with Reconstruction, I don't think a single president's name is mentioned. There's no Obama, there's no Roosevelt, there's no JFK, and there's no LBJ. I mean, think about how do you tell that story without naming the people? And the point isn't, and I know the point isn't, remember a name and be able to, that's not the point. The point is there's a story, right? And if you don't understand that part of the story, so there's a lot of social history in this, but part of what social history does is it teaches you that the perspectives of people that then in different ways spread out and go up, and it means we elect people and they do things, or they don't, and we get rid of them, or we don't get rid of them and things get worse, or I guess you could say the opposite. But that's sort of, in a democracy, that's how things move. And if we want our kids to lead with some sense of that really needs to come out. And I would say it's there, I don't want to say never ever, but it's very, very lost in that, in the current standards. In all of the, I only looked at it's just four secondary histories is what I looked at. And then the other thing I wanted to say on the specificity is just, everybody agrees that the standards from before, there's too much. They're also very well regarded, in part because it's all there, right? It's very coherent and you sort of know what you're supposed to do, but it's too much. Everybody thinks there's too much. But these go so far in the other direction, in my judgment. And I'm not a teacher, so I want to sort of put that out there. But what I am, and my background is more in education policy before I was on the board, is especially in a city where there's so much mobility across LEAs. I mean, we are so unique in that, and probably the most extreme in the country. If all you say is, teach, to go back to your thing, teach one country in Africa about the whatever, whatever issue you pick. Okay, and then I go to another school and everybody else has learned about something different. It's really going to be very hard. And apart from the mobility, there's some things that are more important than others that we really want everybody to know, so that and we lose that here. So that's all.
It's a good segue, I think, to a variety of open discussion issues. I think too, like, when keeping in mind, right, that these need to be useful for teachers, right? Like, there's a big difference between standards and curriculum. I know there's a big difference between teaching and learning, and a document that's meant that we have to update. This is state, right? And so we can go to whatever order we like with these, but some of the questions are, what do you think teachers need to be able to, what do you think teachers need to be able to successfully implement a new standard, thinking both across, DCPS and different charter LEAs. What should all LEAs do to adequately support teachers? And what should this look like so that this work doesn't just fall on teachers as like in effect, unfunded mandate? What role can DC civic organizations play in supporting the teaching of these new standards? And how best can we involve teachers and the DC, I should say, and the DC community in this process before the standards are finalized or given to the state board for. So we'll just leave it there for the moment and we'll kind of hop it out and have the discussion with us where it goes. So we'll volunteer who would like to start by answering any of these or also commenting on what we discussed.
So I'll start. So for me as a class teacher, one of the things that I was thinking about is like teachers having around standards to implement. I think the conversation just briefly Mr. Fraser, what you said was a really good one. Students deserve something just 10 minutes. Those different responses can come from how the standards are implemented, how it's being taught. Teachers really resources around what should be yes.
I just want to piggyback off of that. I think a lot of it starts with, like you said, the language, especially for textbooks, which omit so much and just, frame things. We talked about the global reframing, I think was one of the points. And I think that's really a big issue, especially with textbooks, and how if teachers are teaching to a test or using this textbook and the resources so bad and so limited, I think it really, through that first question, it's hard to implement new standards when everything else is so high.
I'm going to treat these standards differently. I think you have students that can education or
That's not what I heard in my class last year, or when I was in middle school. But it's an adjustment we have to make as teachers. I'm teaching now, I've been teaching EDC for a year. And I have, for the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a group of students who are went to high school in Jamaica. they all went to the same high school in Jamaica, it's a small school, and they all taught for the same English teacher. And I'm teaching the foundations of writing class. And when I tell them about how they're supposed to formulate a 5-paragraph essay, they all say, that's not how we learned how to do it. But as a teacher, you just have to adjust to that and understand that old history or whatever you call it, not hard history. The old history that I learned when I was in high school is not real history. And I think what these standards are getting towards is like real history. What really happened to those the others in the United States, since the United States was all others. I think that's just a matter of adjusting as a teacher.
I want to direct us to the last question because we're over time, but like things are kind of wrapping up. I want to make sure that it's like the access of community outside of people who are really showing up on Saturday to come here. So what are thoughts on how we can be intentional, as a board or as a community to make sure that we're getting feedback? People who are proud of the product if we're continually revising it, and continue to update it. So people live busy lives, we might be able to meet people in ways that are good for them. What ideas do people have as to how we can engage folks before, there's a whole new standards?
Part of my academics was this timeline on when the proposal started.
There's no particular date just yet, but in April, the State Board of Education is taking on an engagement session. We're going to communicate what we hear from the engagement to OSSI. OSSI will do another round of revision on the standards. Then they will come back to us and with the updated product. That could be the summer, it could be the fall.
Just for my own personal experience, I find engagement else so, and maybe working with State Board of Education, but like an initial, meet them, give them an introduction to the students, let them sit with it, and then meet them and hear what is their reactions.
So one thing that I think is super challenging about all this is, as you started out with, it's 180 pages. And it's really, really, really hard to digest, even if you know what you're looking at. And for a lot of people, looking at standards is not what people know how to do, or it's different parts of history that they may or may not be familiar with. So one thing is, I think if you could do some sessions that are like just 7th grade or just US history, or just, I think that would help some people. There'd be less to look at. But even with that, it's a lot. And so maybe within that to be, if OSSI comes up with new anchor standards, which I think is part of what they're trying to do, is to maybe take an anchor standard from a given grade and ask people that. Because otherwise, I just think you'll get blank faces and general feedback.
Like they just got.
That makes a lot of sense to me because we're intersecting with people where they're at, where they work, right? In terms of elementary school, middle school, high school, and they can feel more empowered to give critical feedback on those issues. And then you can also gather people across, whether you're at Perry Middle School or Bell, it can be citywide rather than also just part of the city.
I'll say something really quick about the earlier question, and I wanted to really hear from teachers what they would successfully implement in the standards, and I think just speaking from someone who works with Roxanne Academy, I just want to remind y'all that we are here. There are a lot of other groups who specialize in political education and weaving together interactive and very trauma-informed ways to be able to hold everything like a new standard, a real understanding of history, kind of like that. So I think it's really also like we don't want to overwork teachers, but I think one way to possibly maybe prevent that is bringing in community who specialize in like these specific areas.
So yes, there's a meeting on Tuesday on March 28th at Gallaudet, and that code is actually the site to participate. Mr. Raymond is
And I just want to clarify, that session is open for LEAs and members, so it's not open to the
Okay, it works, but it doesn't work for me.
Well, it would work, I mean, for example, Raymond Covey, it does work for some people in a room, it works for those who are very, it works for Williams, but that session is specifically designed to support LEAs, and we are working closely with the state board, so we are part of that process and conversation.
Yeah, well, thank you all for,
But what I've read is that so I teach you.
I was on the state board, but I didn't run again. So now I'm just looking at my essay. I'm a planning board. Okay, so I'm new to this.
It does.
So I said I'm new to this. So how often do they? So